Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So there's quite a few people who've signed up tonight, which is great. So we'll just wait a little while for as many people to come through as can over the next few minutes. So yeah, do make yourselves at home. I can see, I think everyone I can see is muted at the moment, which is good for now. We'll definitely want you to chip in later in the session. But yes, if you can keep muted until the end of the presentations, that would be great. Thank you. And welcome to anyone else who's just joining us.
I'll let them in, Tom, if you want to start.
Thank you. Right. Well, we'll make a start. A few other people might join us over the next few minutes, but very warm welcome to everyone who's joined us this evening. First dark evening of the working week. So yeah, I've got a bit of dark background here. I can see the odd one there. So yeah, thank you very much for joining us on this evening. But yeah, what better way to spend the end of your day? We hope this should be a really stimulating session. So this is one of the Twilight Talks, so-called, presented by ourselves at the Green Register in collaboration with Eco Merchant. And yeah, really want today to explore another provocative, stimulating, hopefully, idea related to what we all get up to in the sustainable construction sector, but more of an ideas session rather than a training session. And that's what we really try and do with these Twilight Talks, to stimulate discussion, stimulate thought, and yeah, hopefully encourage people to investigate some of these ideas further. So yeah, today's talk, the trouble with good ideas, we need to talk about adoption. Hopefully will chime with a lot of you. We're all in the business of trying to promote new ideas, trying to move things forward, trying to sell new solutions to people. But it's not always easy, as I'm sure a lot of you know. And yeah, we'd love to talk around that a bit more this evening. But we're going to take a slightly different approach to perhaps the normal format of our talks for anyone who's been along to an event before. Today, we're going to use a Pecha Kucha format. Some of you may have heard of this, some of you may have not. But yeah, what it is a format where we're challenging our speakers to use just 20 slides, which they've prepared, and talk to those 20 slides, and each of them for only 20 seconds. So I'll be on the timer, and I'll be moving their slides forward inexorably, probably much to their annoyance, but that's the challenge. And really the idea of this is to keep presentations quite short and punchy and to the point. And yeah, and challenge those speakers to really make their ideas concise and try and deliver what they have to say in a short space of time. But obviously, therefore, by definition, those ideas will be coming at you quite fast, and will probably benefit from a bit of unpacking, and that'll be the point of the second half of the session, to really talk around those ideas. I'll have some questions, but I'm sure many of you will as well. So yeah, do feel free to, if you'd like, as you're thinking of those questions, type them in the chat, or simply make a note and wait till the end of those two presentations, and then you can use the hand up function, and we'll try and get to everyone that stage. So just to say a little bit more about the how things are going to run. So very shortly, I'll introduce you to our two speakers who've kindly volunteered for this. And then they'll each give their presentations. So that should take precisely 6 minutes, 40 seconds each. I'll give them a quick breather in between, and then we'll move on to our second speaker. And then after that, we'll open up for questions. So yeah, that's the shape of the session. Right. So yeah, without further ado, I'll introduce our two speakers and then hand over to the first one. So yeah, delighted to be joined tonight by Will Kirkman of Eco Merchant. We work closely with Will, and he is in the business of trying to sell sustainable building products to us all, and the challenges around that. And then our second speaker is Stephen Beggs of Curtins Engineers, who's a structural engineer by specialism, but also works a lot around the sustainability of engineering solutions. So again, a different take on the challenge of selling good ideas to people. Right. Well, our first speaker is going to be Will Kirkman. So Will, I will hand over to you to briefly introduce your subject, and I'll line up your slides.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. It's nice to be here. I can't say I'm a Petra Kucha virgin, as I know Stephen is as well. So, please be forgiving with us. I suppose probably where I'd start with this is a quote from a guy called Pat Johnson, who I'd be astonished if any of you have ever heard of. But he owned a business up in Scotland that sold hire and supplies, and it sold thousands, and it had thousands and thousands of product lines. And one of the things he said to me as I was looking around is, and I questioned how many drill bits he's got. He said, people only buy drill bits because they can't buy holes. And I just thought to myself, that is a really interesting way of looking at it. So if you invented a way to sell holes, but it's how you see the world depends entirely on our frame of reference. Mine's different from yours. Yours will be different from somebody else's, your clients and everybody else's. And what tends to happen is that we use evidence as common ground, as shared information. So that decisions aren't made in a laboratory, they're made in context. But data or technical information in particular is used as an anchor. The thing about this is that we all succumb to other behavioural inputs as well. And we don't leave them at home when we go to work. The best quote I've ever heard on this was from a guy called Kumar Golhotra, who was at the time was president of Lincoln Motors. And he said that he's now vice president of Ford. But he said that car making is 100,000 rational decisions in search of one emotional one. And that is really good advice. That's how I view construction. So in short, the presentation that I'm going to go through is a load of behavioral observations about how the engagement happens within the construction industry. And my view is that behavioral patterns behave like they are empirical data. We just don't treat them as such. And most of us don't recognize the way in which they're codified or supported. But this is really the core message is a simple one. Don't ignore the behavioral and don't let logic crowd it out. So, Tom, I can't say not a bit nervous. I am, having never done this before. I hope I manage this within the 20 seconds for each one. I have rehearsed. You can count me in when you're ready. Oh, you started. Okay, so
no, I haven't started. Just bring up the first slide. I'll stick to my agreement to count you in. All right. Well, and Will, 3, 2, 1, go.
The gentleman in the picture is Steve Sasson. That is the world's first digital camera. In 1975, he presented it to the board of Kodak, who said, no, why would be interested in this, and deliberately shelved it. Kodak made the mistake of thinking that they were in the film business. The business that they were actually in was memory preservation. So what they'd done was they confused the tool with the value of the business. In 2012, Kodak went bust. So have we all just become fluent in tools? Somewhere along the way, the tools stopped guiding decisions and started making them. When we optimize for ratings and not reality, and we design for compliance, not comfort, and we box tick to avoid blame, it's not that the tools are wrong, it's just we've let them define the process and what good looks like. And at our core, what we are is we're in the comfort and well-being business. Things that are too good to be true, it isn't logic, it's instinct. The more perfect a product sounds, the more likely we think we're being sold to. So we trust flaws and we doubt claims that sound too neat. What do you see here? Well, Whizziati is a phrase coined by Daniel Kahneman and published in his book, Thinking Fast and Slow. What you see is what is all there is what he's saying. That's what the abbreviations for form. And this is why we don't see undervalued and unstated elements of transactions. Sorry, I'm losing my way a little bit here. I'll pick it up. Risk, part of the job, factored in, but regret, that's personal. If you try something new and it fails, you're exposed. And this is known and institutionalized as a compromise. We stick with what we know because it has predictable failures. Greenwash, problem. If everybody claims it, nobody owns it. And that becomes greenwash fatigue. And that's a really damaging element of selling. The most credible thing we can say today, what our products don't do. It isn't a technical problem, it's an adoption problem. So complexity breeds doubt, and there's a limit to useful data to certain audiences. Beyond it, you're just adding noise. And so adoption doesn't come from sounding smarter, it tends to come from being understood. Products spreading socially, not rationally. A builder doesn't really care what the spec sheet says, he asks his mates. Have you used it? Is it any good? And that's where the trust lives. And if his mate hasn't heard of it, or the merchant hasn't heard of it, then he's not going to be that interested. So stories sell products. Fame is important. Being known is important. We design for how things look. And this is not new. Le Corbusier's Villa Savoie, Ludwig Mies van der Rohe's Farnsworth House, Norman Foster's Harmon Hotel, compliant, structurally sound, legal, iconic, and utter failures for those people who lived in them. So if you don't live with the consequences, then you maximize for profit or compliance or status. Out of sight, out of budget. How many of all of us seen this? What gets cut is what you don't see. What doesn't get cut is the bathroom, the kitchen, the flooring, the lighting. And usually the person making the cut isn't the one who has to suffer the consequences. Go back to the, oh, I think you've skipped a slide there. Sorry, thank you there, Tom. So when manufacturers produce, labs test, certify, and architects specify, and merchants distribute and trade installs, great, but what customers buy is comfort. So performance is usability. That's often the way we look at it. Imagine if you were going on holiday and this was the picture you took from the tower before you boarded the plane. Would you be keen on boarding it? However good the spec sheet looks, trust or lack of it, our decisions aren't about facts. They're about how the facts make us feel. And reputation trumps reason. If your brand feels wrong, it won't matter. If it can't be modeled, it doesn't count. And proof is demanded up front. And that's what data is for, isn't it? So what happens? The spreadsheet doesn't just recognize the decision, it records it, and to many, it is the decision. So our industry demands data on everything. It creates dizzying supply of detail. And the irony is that detail was to help supposed aid judgment, but instead it's rewarding what's countable. We think our brain works rationally. It doesn't. Decisions get made, then justified and explained after, when they make contact with the real world. This is what Daniel Kahneman referred to as system one. System two is having to think about it. Where would you hit the ball? Where would you take the penalty? Statistically, down the middle is the statistically the best place to score. But if you do that and the goalkeeper doesn't move, you look like an arse. If you kick it to the top right corner and he saves it, you're unlucky and the goalkeeper's the hero. So if we do what everybody else does, we feel safe, even if it fails. Money down the drain. People avoid loss. They fear loss more than they desire gain. If they don't feel the loss or they don't have the loss pointed out to them, they won't act. And that's how value is most successfully framed within the industry. Jared Spool, I can talk about this later. He was a UX consultant, one change, one sentence, £300 million of extra revenue in the early days of the internet. People don't leap, they step. That's what we're looking at. So, and this is what the path to adoption is through nudges, tweaks, and behavioral associations. And builders already use behavioral tools. We mentioned it before. Social proof, my mate said it was decent. The halo effect or the authority heuristic, it was used on Wembley Stadium or the London Eye. I saved 2 skip loads, loss aversion. It isn't manipulation, it's navigation, and you can codify it all you like, but people still mitigate risk through biases. The best product in the world fails if it feels risky. Adoption happens when something feels safe, normal, and easy. And here's the thing, we all know, don't make perfect the enemy of the good. Most good ideas don't fail because they don't work, because nobody made them feel doable. And lastly, don't forget the person buying from the builder's merchant. In 2023-24, £65 billion on RMI in the UK, with at least 1/3 being self-specified. And this is where decisions are often made or influenced within the supply chain. Don't underestimate the value of merchants, please. We are suppliers and behavioural levers. Phew. Thank you.
Fantastic.
I hope that was okay. My first ever Pecha Kucha.
Well done. Well, I know that's not straightforward. I've done it only a couple of times myself, but yeah, it certainly wasn't easy. So yeah, well, there we are. We're getting a few virtual rounds of applause there, Will.
Well, good luck, Stephen.
Yeah. No.
Oh, thank you, everyone. That's so kind.
How did it feel, Will? How did it go?
Stressful. I mean, yeah. That's not how I'm used to presenting at all. Okay, well, but I understand. I really get how it might work. Yeah, I'm genuinely really chuffed with all these little hands going up. That's really so sweet. Thank you.
Well, we'll come back to you obviously later, Will, to unpack some of that. But yeah, hopefully for all of our audience, there's a lot to chew on or think on there, and maybe something in that has struck a chord with you, or prompted a question in your mind. So yeah, do hang on to that.
Can you just reassure Bob that I am breathing normally now? He's just
yeah, do hang on to those thoughts, and we'll after our next presentation, we'll, as I say, we'll come back to you all and open up a discussion. So yes, secondly, we're going to come to Stephen Beggs. So yeah, I very briefly introduced you, Stephen, but yeah, is there anything else you'd like to say briefly about yourself or your topic before we kick off?
As you've said, Tom, thank you very much. I'm a civil and structural engineer. I work for Curtains, where I've worked for the last 12 years or so. We design buildings in concrete, steel and timber, and I'm going to be talking about timber today. Some of our own buildings are included. We do new builds, we do retrofits, and I've also been at the centre of our development of a carbon reduction strategy in Curtains as well, trying to reduce our embodied carbon, and of course timber design plays into that. I do quite a bit with conservation projects, and at the moment I'm involved sort of outside of work with Jacob Wells Baths, and I've been involved with Clevedon Pier for 30 years as well as an engineer, and then as a trustee at the moment. So a broad range of stuff, but timber, conservation, retrofit, sustainability is sort of the thread that runs through most of my work.
Great. Thank you, Stephen. Right, as ready as you'll ever be?
I think so. Let's give it a go.
Okay, let me share your slides and then I'll give you a countdown. 1 sec. Let me just get back to the beginning there. All right.
Okay. Happy, Tom?
I think I'm happy. Right, 3, 2, 1.
Afternoon, everyone. I'm going to talk about building in timber, why it's a good idea and what prevents further adoption. This is one of my favourite buildings. It's a Grade 1 listed barn built by monks over 700 years ago for the storage of crops and the collection of taxes. This and the church would have been the centre of the village, and we're going to look at what's inside. It's a huge building, 50 metres long and 16 metres tall. Oak throughout. Oh, I think we
Sorry, my bad. Keep going.
that. Okay. Breathtaking in its elegance and structural form. But it's natural that the monks built in this way. Timber is what was available, easily worked, plentiful, long span, and good for 700 years of use. But timber could be used for domestic buildings too. This 13th century house is in Herefordshire. The locals clearly had no problem with the adoption of timber construction using local hardwood, raised off the ground on a stone plinth to reduce damp. Look at the craftsmanship of these joints, every piece fulfilling a function. And then along came the Great Fire of London in 1666, destroying much of the city. People sought fireproof construction, and the use of masonry grew in popularity, followed by iron, steel, and concrete. Mass-produced buildings became possible, and the use of timber decreased.
If I can just ask you to keep looking at the microphone, Stephen.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So fast forward to two details from one of my projects 20 years ago. We didn't have to use timber, but we wanted to. Why? What makes it attractive? Well, for its visual quality and warmth, it demands to be touched. It has a historic resonance. It's easily worked. It has a high strength to weight ratio. Glues have extended the beam spans even further. And for roofs, fire is not so problematic. Excellent environmental credentials, prefabricated, and the whole of this building, Reading Business School, arrived on 3 lorries. So why aren't we doing this more? This Austrian warehouse has lower embodied carbon than steel and has many of the attributes of the last project. Perhaps the barriers to adoption are cost, perhaps fear of the unknown, perhaps we're simply not confident enough to offer timber solutions to our clients. So this is the kit of parts that we now have. Medieval builders had oak, but look at the huge choice of timber technology available to us now. Are we sufficiently skilled and experienced to promote, design, and specify this range of materials? Surely timber flat pack construction is a great way to deliver large numbers of affordable houses. So I've mentioned some of the global barriers to adoption in the last few slides. Now I'm going to look at some project examples of why timber struggles to be adopted. Insurance is a significant obstacle, as are new regs following the Grenfell tragedy, our ability to deliver durability and long-term investment. So this next building was conceived as a timber frame. It had impressive low carbon credentials and would have shared all the positive attributes that timber brings. But the insurance and building regs issues could not be resolved, leaving unacceptable risk in the project. So we changed to concrete. And failure to get insurance is the biggest barrier to the adoption of timber in large buildings. Whilst fire is a major part of this, water damage is a bigger issue for most insurers. The Mass Timber Insurance Playbook seeks collaboration between insurance and the construction industry, mitigating risks at every stage. So Velindre Hospital was intended to be the greenest hospital in Wales. We compared frame types against multiple design drivers. CLT and glulam beams, based on a small grid, delivered the lowest carbon solution. But then the trouble started. The difficulty of vibration, fire protection, cleanliness gave many constraints, and carbon impact kept increasing. Here are some of the parts here, but in desperation, I compared it to a concrete flat slab solution and found concrete to have lower embodied carbon due to the small grid, and all our technical problems were solved. My conclusion: timber isn't right for every project. So after Grenfell, government banned combustible materials in residential external frames over 18 metres tall. There is a total ban on timber in external frames in all social housing in London now. This, coupled with the difficult insurance market, works further against timber's use. So the mass-produced timber industry needs predictability of investment regulation and adoption to succeed. Production lines such as this require proper long-term planning, and investors need a stable market if they're to do this. We're not there yet in the UK. So a couple of years ago, I spent time rebuilding the deck in my garden. There was lots of sound timber, and I reused everything I could, but I kept coming across pieces that had rotted because they couldn't dry out. And in a composite construction, I couldn't remove them. We need to think about design for maintainability and durability. The ultimate outcome of a failure in a timber building is shown here, a 6-year-old primary school in Devon demolished in 2016. This is a disaster for resources and impact on the users. As an industry, I wonder whether we could have prevented this if more attention had been paid to detailing. So to prevent this happening, we need to know what we're doing with timber. Do we have the skills and experience to prevent failure? Are we teaching timber tech to the right people at the right time? Are we sharing experience and knowledge across teams so that we can design and build details such as this properly? If we can overcome these barriers, we can deliver outstanding timber buildings. Here's a highly flexible and sustainable office building, a hybrid of timber and steel, and who wouldn't want to work here? The driving principle was zero waste. The structure can be unbolted, reused, and recycled at the end of its life. This is the last slide, one of Curtin's low-energy sustainable housing projects. It has timber panels, straw insulation, low embodied energy, high thermal efficiency, and PV panels. This proves to me that there is a future for timber buildings, but we need to work hard to deliver their success.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Stephen. How did that feel?
Bit dodgy, because I don't know what it was like for anyone else, Tom, but each time the slide changed, it then went to the next one and back.
That is entirely my fault. So I'd like to apologise to everyone on this at this event for that. There was
it made it a bit of a roller coaster.
Yes, some times that were set up to change. Fighting with my manual control. So yeah,
the lesson here is, Tom, is design for defensibility. That's
so I'm sorry, folks, if it was a bit glitchy on my part. I looked up sometimes and there was something a little bit different there. Anyway, there we go. There's some nice pictures in there, regardless.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much to both of our speakers. Right. Well, lots of food for thought there, I think. Let me just pull up the chat sidebar. So far, just some some well dones and some shared nerves on the side there. But yeah, any as we go forward, if anyone's got questions they'd like to type in the sidebar, please do. But equally, do feel free to use the hand up function if you'd like to ask a question, and do please feel free to just unmute and ask a question as well, because at the moment I don't have hands up lined up, so it's open season. But I will kick off by starting with a few questions that this brought up for me. So yeah, so to start with you, Will. So you definitely zoomed out and tried to look at this challenge in general, and then Stephen has looked at perhaps a more specific example of adoption in a particular area. But I imagine you have some even more focused and specific examples of adoption challenges in your business. Will, have you got an example you could share with us of a product that you found difficult, where adoption's been difficult?
Yeah, I would, but I'd preempt that by saying this, that I'm not ashamed to admit it, I'm just about to enter into my 65th summer, and I've been doing this a long time. And for probably the last 15 to 20 years, I've spent my life largely weighted towards technical, although I'm not technical myself. And pretty much when you talk to all the people that are involved in our sector, whether they are suppliers or everybody else, on my side of the business, on our side of the business, Everybody seems to grow about the same. 10 to 12% a year is not unheard of. You know, COVID was a little bit up. And everybody seems to be ratcheting up the amount of CPDs they're doing, the amount of technical stuff they're doing, and still we grow the same. And it began to dawn on me about 5 or 6 years ago that there's got to be something else that would help uplift, that will give us some chance of reaching some sort of escape velocity. I mean, natural insulation, depending on where you're getting numbers from, is still in some cases sub 1% of the UK market. It is a really small part of the market. So we shouldn't need to do too much to at least double that. And even if it's 2 or 3%, which is the maximum people think it might be. I'll give you an example, blur-proof. We brought blur-proof into the UK, I don't know now, maybe 7 years ago. And the first thing that the manufacturer, who's from Belgium, I knew the chemist who formulated this, a guy called Roland Vaas. And he teamed up with an enterprising young Belgian fella called Herman. And they had a series of coatings. And this was one of the products that they'd worked on. At the time, Belgium and the Europeans were much more advanced in terms of airtightness, and they had a large school program in Belgium, and they'd cut their teeth on it. And they'd done something, by the time we'd got it through its BBA, they'd done something like 260 schools, passive schools. So they'd done a lot. We brought it to the UK, we put it through the BBA, and we hired a PR company in Birmingham. And we had a good look at this, and we spent an awful lot of time thinking about how do we approach this. And in the end, we decided that just going on a technical basis wasn't going to cut the mustard. We wanted something that would stand out. So we ran this campaign, marvelously called Show Us Your Crack, which was aimed at builders. And of course, you can see where the imagery goes with this, can't you? But the idea was we'd get trades to send us pictures of cracks in building that were leaking air. Yeah, either deliberate or accidental or just emissions from design. And we spent a fortune on this. In the first 3 months of the PR campaign, we had 4,000 inquiries. And we didn't sell a single bucket of blur-proof. Not one. And the PR company went on to win a national PR awards campaign for most innovative campaign for a new product. Okay. This was what, 7 or 8 years ago. Within 3 years of nudging, of doing all the things that I was trying to get across in my presentation, of looking at the behavioural side of this, we began to change the way in which demand was pulled out of the industry, until people would say to architects, have you considered using? You know, we changed it. We managed to change the perception of how people saw airtightness. And then next thing you know, Sudal, Proclima, BASF, they've all got them. Everybody's got a liquid applied membrane, and now we're still the first, and we still think we're the best, but we are one of many. And thank goodness, because it's actually a really useful product in the right circumstances. So
on picking up on that, Will, a question in the that's gone in the chat from Claire Lutzow saying, could you expand on the problem of contractors being only willing to use materials they've experience of, and how you might bring smaller contractors along with embracing lower carbon materials?
Claire, I will happily answer that. We could give the rest of this whole session to this one question.
Let's give it 2 minutes. Let's
give it 2 minutes, and let's just deal with some blunt realities. Don't undervalue trades. Okay, there's people who do a crap job in everything. There's crap architects and there's good architects, crap builders and good builders. But generally speaking, my experience and our team's experience is that trades have a number of things that you should recognize. They're skilled. They have pride in what they do. Okay, they need to earn a living. You know, they're an integral part of the machine that needs to be recognized as such. And we are just at the moment, by the way, to address this, we're looking at, if anybody's seen it, there's a radio channel that's based in London called Fix Radio. And some exploratory work with them has revealed that actually there's a great appetite amongst builders to hear about this stuff, even if they're not necessarily going to use it, a la blur-proof. So the first thing is recognize trades as being a vital part of the equation. Okay. If you're going to do that, then the next thing you want to do is talk to them. Yeah. And engage with them. One of the ways you can do it with airtightness is appointing an airtightness champion. Okay. Now that's not going to be the architect. It's going to be somebody who's on site. And if it's a small building company, then that's fine. That's the best way to do it. That gets engagement. The other thing is my little bugbear about case studies, not to devalue them, but case studies are often aspirational and people don't recognize themselves in it. So one of the things that we prefer to do is how-to guides, because anybody can do it. Okay. And then the last thing I would say is that some of our advertising, certainly in Passive House Plus magazine and recently, has been an advert of a picture of an older builder, my age really, and the caption reads something like, "It turns out you can teach an old dog new tricks." Okay, and what we're saying is we can upskill you, and if we upskill the workforce, then there's less that you see in Builders Merchant News and other things like you see today, which is people warning from the CPA and various others that we're going to suffer from a skills shortage. It's not a skills shortage. It's an adoption problem. If you teach people to an adjacent skill, then you've upskilled them. Okay, so it goes back to the same thing. It's about the form of engagement, but in the main answer is engage with trade. Yeah,
great. Well, I'm sure we'll come back round to some of those related questions, but yeah, to bring you back in, Stephen. So you talked quite clearly about some of the challenges around that you've experienced around the adoption of timber structures, and also where of what you've learned about where it may be appropriate and where it may not. Could you give us a quick sort of success story example of where you think that you have managed in your team to persuade a client or a contractor to go with the timber option, and perhaps why you think that worked?
I think the Reading Business School, where I put up that close-up picture of two details, and then there was the main building that followed. That was a university project about 15-20 years ago, and it was about 25 million at the time. So what would that be now? Say 40 million, something like that, maybe slightly more. And I think it worked, honestly, because we used the timber for the external envelope and not for load-bearing elements. So we got all the visual qualities of the timber, the warmth, the fact that people wanted to touch it, etc., from a roof element where the fire protection and the insurance issues were less. So because of that, people could get quite easily through those fundamental obstacles which clients have to deal with, and we could progress on into the design. And so we managed to dodge a lot of the issues which I brought up in the challenges section, which tend to drag a project down in timber. And we achieved it. And it, I think, delivered everything people wanted to from that structure. You got the robustness of the concrete in the main frame with some of the steel walkways and the staircases, with the lightness and the warmth and the visual attraction of the envelope in timber. So I think that's a pretty powerful combination. It went wrong at the hospital when we tried to get the load-bearing elements to be in the timber as well. And then all the obstacles came forward. So choose your project. Follow the bits that are going to be straightforward to get through. I think that feels to me where we are in the UK.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, that point about maybe beyond that first point you made about is it the right project, a sort of sub layer of that of is it the right bit of the right project? So
yes.
And that's I think that's a really interesting observation, because it suggests there are areas where adoption might be easier or more palatable than other areas, depending on various technical factors.
And going to the way Will phrased it earlier, people have to make money, they have to use things that they're familiar with in order to succeed, etc., etc. So maybe just pick your battles. It was pretty clear once we were halfway through the Welsh hospital that this was going absolutely nowhere, and it was just about trying to get out with everybody with some face saved and do the things that were right. And in the end, guess what? The bits that stayed in timber were the roofs and the facades.
And then also, as another layer, I'm sure there are lots of layers we might unpick here, but is there also an element, Stephen, of the one answer won't necessarily be the same answer, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line because something else has changed. That I don't know. It might be legislation. It might be material cost. It might be something else.
Absolutely right, Tom. And if, for example, the insurance playbook gets in, so that the language of insurance and fire protection, safety, and all that sort of stuff, life safety versus property safety, if that can get into more common parlance so that people are comfortable talking about it, that I think is a thing. I think there's another one as well, Tom, and I use the example from your old practice, Orsman Road, where I think there's a London thing. I have a feeling that there's a willingness to try things perhaps in London that might not get through in some of the regional cities. And I think there's perhaps a more conservative outlook. There's less money in some of the other cities. So I think some of those obstacles to timber building on a grand scale, like the office block that I put up, are maybe felt more sharply in the regional centres.
Yeah, and I mean, just on that point, so full disclosure to the audience in the room. Whilst I haven't worked professionally with Stephen, I have worked in a similar field in past years in modern timber construction. So yeah, familiar with some of these challenges, and I think certainly the point you make, Stephen, about money, I think is a really big one, because as a sort of add-on to what you've said, in my experience, in say London, the tenants who might be moving into a new office building, and yeah, people who are renting those spaces have their own sustainability ambitions, demands, shareholder demands on sustainability. So there's quite a push from the sort of money side to value that sustainability, which I've seen. Right, to jump back to a couple more comments in the chat. So so Bob Eden says, definitely don't ask a carpenter to weld steel. Bob, do you want to expand on that a tiny bit? Because it could that could mean a few things, perhaps. Are you happy to unmute and tell us what you're thinking?
Found it. Yeah, I was just thinking along the line. The most frightening things that clients and designers can hear when they turn up on a construction site is a builder saying, "I thought you'd like it like that," I mean, and when nobody does, and that's because they have their own sort of handwriting, their own style, their own knowledge base of how they do things, which relates to the making money out of it and that sort of thing. But it's very difficult to relearn something. So it doesn't matter how often you go for it. I mean, I remember when I was at college, one of the things that turned up very early on was somebody turned up with a drafting machine that would do 60-degree angles like nobody's business. That immediately produced hexagonal buildings all over the bloody place. And that sort of Marshall McLuhan medium is the message and all that sort of business. It's fine. It's how, and the other thing I was sort of musing on was how you get beyond, how you get to substance rather than style, and it's terribly easy. A lot of green issues, a lot of green products and so forth, they're promoted almost. It's almost a religion, and that in itself doesn't always go down terrifyingly well in the outer world. A lot of people don't have the same belief base, and it's things like that. But it fundamentally it's a slow process.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, that point you make about the semi-religious belief system. I'm sure a lot of people in this field, perhaps a lot of people on this call, feel very passionately about sustainability.
Oh, I'm amongst the worst, I think.
But yeah, it can be off-putting, can't it? When you're overzealous. And I think I've probably experienced that as well. Thanks, Bob.
We're doing what comes naturally. That's really what I think, and that reflected on the history of the use of timber. You built big barns with timber because it was there and it was local materials, and it's how we learn from that, and how we also learn about durability and length, because an insurance industry is based on buildings with a projected lifespan of maybe 60 years or less. That's there are so many aspects which have to be undone.
So I can I just pick up on that, Tom?
Yeah, of course.
There's a few interesting points here. I mean, the first thing is that what happens is when things are doable, is they get done. Yeah, and this is constantly what we're talking about with our manufacturer partners, and they keep on coming and saying, we've tweaked this product by this. We've now got the alphanumeric name as, instead of being the XP130, it's now the XP130A, and it does something slightly different. So we're constantly on at people about this about the whole time is that you have to make things doable. This is why things like PIR persist. I mean, the story with that one that intrigues me is how Gapo tape got a hold of the market with PIR. It goes back to the point that I made in one of my slides about institutionalized compromise. So you have a precision board made in a factory, which is made of chemicals, which none of us like, which goes into a building which is not precision made in the same way. So you have a gap. And I'm happy to share it, by the way. Might be interesting to do so, but have my numbers checked. But about the aggregated leakage that you get with poorly installed PIR board and then subsequent shrinkage. So two enterprising fellows from Belfast invented a tape that you stick around the board so that you eliminate the problem of the gap. Has it reduced the amount of people, has that increased the amount of opportunity for us with natural insulation materials which don't suffer from the same problem? No. Institutionalized compromise has taken over. And what happens is we're now going to stick with the chip product that we know with all its faults, and we're going to mitigate some of those failures by using this other product, which now makes it more expensive per square meter than rigid wood fiber board. So, there's lots of bonkers behavior, but where I think that everybody is right is this is being done by increments. There's a great book by a guy called Richard Thaler, Nobel laureate, won the prize for economics. Wrote a book called Nudge, which led to the Blair government establishing a government department of behavioural economics and behavioural science, which they used to great effect, by the way, I might add, by no political allegiance declared, but they managed to persuade people and set up a scheme where they changed the contribution to pensions significantly because people not saving was a problem. And it was done through behavioural science, behavioural scientific principles. So I think that you're right. It goes back again to the trade thing too, is, teach people adjacent skills. With Blurproof, we were looking initially as well for our contract suppliers with people who spray paint, spray render, spray something else, because at least they are adjacent in terms of their skill set and their equipment set. So a change of nozzle, a change of pipe work, and a change of application, and away we go. So that was, and just one thing on the deep greens, you don't have to be a vegan or a vegetarian to enjoy vegetables, for goodness sake.
To pick up on another question in the chat from Kirsty Shanahan saying, one for you here, Stephen, saying, what is the role of homeowners in the process of adoption? And if I could expand that, because I know you probably don't design a lot of homes these days, Stephen, but expand that to the role of the client in this process of adoption.
Yeah, I don't design a lot of homes, but I am a homeowner. So I guess my feeling is that if I wanted to build an extension on my house, the only person who can influence that in the early days is me. So I have to have a clear plan. I have to say, I want it. My options are, I want it exactly like you'd want to build it, please, builder. That's one decision. Or you can say, I'd really like to try this, this, and this. And maybe you'll get kicked back on 2 or 3 of them. Sorry, 1 or 2 of them. But on that third, if you really want that, go for it. I think it will default to what the builder wants to do unless you really activate against that. And I have only one experience to share, which is that we put a staircase in our house. Long story why we did. It was a regular timber staircase and it needed a particular opening cut in the floor. And the only thing as an engineer I wanted to make sure was that the way the joist had been cut was the right way. I produced one drawing and gave it to the builder. He never used the drawing. It sat on the windowsill, got covered in dust, and I came back when he'd made the hole in the floor. It was completely wrong. And I said, well, why have you done that? He said, well, that's the way I've always done it. So I needed only one thing to work in that whole project. And I couldn't get my builder to adopt that way of working because he'd always done it a different way, which didn't work in this case. So I think it is a challenge.
And not to kind of troll you too much on that particular issue, Stephen, but on reflection, do you think you could have gone about that in a different way? I don't know, explained it differently, or where might the solution have sat?
Yeah, it's a really, really good point. I was really aware, and it's back to a point that Will said. That builder knew his business really well, but it was a very unusual way to make a hole in the floor, which I won't go into, because of the geometry. And so it had to be done this way. Otherwise, I was really concerned that the thing wouldn't stand up. So it was the one place I could add some value. I hope I was considerate and kind and fair in the way I was working with him, but he didn't want to know. He was going to do it his way. And I don't think my example, I'm sure there are people on the call who would say that's not an isolated example. It's just an example. So how could I have done it better? I don't know. It was the only drawing he had to look at.
Did you disclose your expertise?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
I did. There's something else interesting going on here is about reframing the question. We've got two articles which are on our blog which are absolutely stand out in the amount of times they're read and downloaded. One is U-values for dummies. The other one is the worst building you can build by law. Now, if you talk to a homeowner who wants an extension built and you say, would you like the worst extension you can build by law? They'll be going, God, no. Well, that's what you're going to get. Because everything without clear instruction and without the right form of engagement and the right kind of framing defaults to compliance as the ceiling rather than the floor. So what you end up with is you end up with a builder, or because he knows he's going to get signed off, he'll just do it the way he's always done it. Okay. And so some of this, in our experience over the years, is how we talk to clients. And I looked at the numbers just out of interest. When we re-established Eco-Merchant from its previous history as an employee independent business in 2014, we had something like 6,000 account holders. These were cash and credit accounts. We've now got 43,000. So what we know is that there's an ever-growing base of people who are doing what everybody would like them to do, which is using building regs as your start point rather than your end point. Okay. But the other thing to do with that you raised with this, which is interesting to me, is policing. When you talk to building control, yeah. So I'm tempted to sometimes describe clients or customers who want building work done rather as victims, because that's what they end up being. They end up being the custodians of all the problems. Everybody else has taken their profit and disappeared out and they've gone, and you're left with the whole thing. And actually the examples I gave in the slides of Mies van der Rohe's building, of Corbusier's the Savoy House and the others, even Foster's Tower in LA, the Harmon Tower, that's still unoccupied now. They didn't discover the structural problems with that building until they were on the 21st floor. So the thing about this is even within regs with fully compliant, what you think is a fully compliant building, you can still build something that's genuinely awful and unlivable. Okay, and the person who bears the brunt of the cost for this is the person who occupies the building.
But in a way, I mean, I don't disagree with a lot of that, Will. But in a way, that's sort of the opposite of the theme of tonight's event, isn't it? It's almost, you could argue that some of these more forward-looking designers were trying to get clients to adopt something new, and they are held up as examples of exactly that.
I wouldn't for 1 minute want to stifle innovation, etc. And I'm delighted. All the clients, by the way, were thunderingly rich. You know, the Corbusier house was left. Was abandoned basically because they'd spent millions on it, and they just said, oh, well, we can't be bothered with that now. They were so rich they didn't really care. I think it's a very interesting point, but there are always opposites. So coins have two sides. Ice can be broken from above and below, whichever phrase you want to use. They're all part of the same issue, which is to do with the behavioral nature of decision making rather than the factual nature of decision making. Okay, factual decision making, compliance decision making fails to accommodate the adoption of new products quite commonly.
So this, to kind of, we've only got, well, just to say to everyone, we've only got a few minutes left already. These are fairly short events, and even though we kept our presentations really short, we're already quite short on time. So if anyone does have a final question, do please feel free to simply unmic and shout it out. If I don't come to you in time. A comment in the chat from Di Gwyn talking about a perspective on what happens after the useful life of products. Is that something related to adoption of new products? Di, do you want to just expand on that?
Well, I suppose there's things like all those petrochemical insulants, which are going to be kind of fucking up our environment forever, perhaps. Whereas we could be taking on wood fibre and so on, hemp and whatever. And of course, there are issues about how you use them. They aren't necessarily as easy to use as stuck in a bit of polystyrene, but I don't know. But we all, we don't have a perspective which thinks about 50 years after the building has been torn down. But we are making decisions which have an effect there.
Yeah, and I guess that goes to perhaps the heart of one of the key challenges, doesn't it? Which is that probably most clients, including probably most of us, don't usually take the 50-year view when we're buying something. We take we're lucky if we take a 5-year view. It's quite often it's a short-term decision we're making financially. If it's our home, we think, well, we might not be here forever, etc., etc. So, that long-term view is definitely a challenge, isn't it? And if more people
and there are things which I don't really know about. So just on timber preservation, you can fill these things up with arsenic and whatever. That's one way of solving the problem, but that's a problem further down the line. Or you can use organophosphates and so on to protect your timber, and that's another problem in the environment. I don't know. Is there even a safe way of getting timber to not rot? Apart from keeping it dry, I suppose.
Well, keeping it dry.
It goes back to Brown, Garton, McDonough, doesn't it? With cradle to cradle, dry, warm, comfortable buildings that are well maintained last a long time. Stephen's first image was a building that's lasted what, 800 years? So we can do this and we can build in that way. But this is a whole nother evening topic, isn't it? Which would be fascinating. Why do we build shit stuff? But yeah, the best way to keep timber preserved is to keep it dry, to choose the right timber in the first place, but also to keep it dry.
I think the biggest thing that we could do as clients and designers is think as much about our dismantling and durability and maintainability as we do about design. We put so much effort, so much creative effort into this house, this building, this school, this hospital is going to look amazing. I sometimes want to put in brackets after it in the first year. And then how we keep it going. Can we dismantle it? Can we replace it? Can we maintain it? AKA my garden deck, where I had to take down loads of it because I couldn't take it apart. I think it's on all of us in our role in the building industry to think about dismantling, back to back to those things, then we are starting to take the right decisions about how to keep our buildings alive for longer.
Great. And so, as I say, we're now already a minute over, so I might just wrap up that thought and then say a kind thank you to everyone involved. So I think, yeah, on that, in my experience, just related to that last point, who the client is and their view, their investment in the building makes a huge difference. Most of my career, I worked for developers who were, as an architect, who were there to make money, and so took a relatively short view on the building. They wanted to sell it as quickly as possible, and then after a number of years, I got to work for a client who was building a factory for their business for the long term, and so it was there. They were paying the energy bills, they were doing the maintenance, they were looking after the building, and it was literally in their best interest to make the best, lowest maintenance, lowest bills building. And so they did, and that was their driver. So it was a very different take. So yeah, again, maybe back to that long-term view. Bit unfair of me to have the final word, but there you go. I'm hosting this, so I'm going to do it. But I will just say a really big thank you to Will Kirkman and to Stephen Beggs. As a lot of you appreciated, that was a tough gig. I set them both, and I think they both rose to the occasion wonderfully. So thank you both. Hopefully you've now got a tool up your sleeve for punchy presentations going forward. Thank you to everyone who's joined tonight. Yeah, hope you find that stimulating, interesting, food for thought. It'll probably sit with you for a few days. If you've got any ideas for future Twilight talks, do please drop us an email. You know, the point of these is to be more wide ranging, more provocative. So we'd love to hear from you if there's a topic you'd like to hear on. And equally, do please take a look at our website at all the other events we've got going on. There's every week or two, new events will come onto the website. So yeah, do keep checking back. Thank you again, and yeah, hope we'll see some of you on at a future event.
Tom, can I just say one final thing?
Yes, please do. Will.
I've been talking about this area for a long time with lots of different people, and I've got some notes which I'd be happy to share that could go along with the slides. But basically it just outlines the broad behavioural patterns, what are called heuristics and biases, which we've talked about. It's just a little series of jottings which might be useful to some people. I would be happy to share that with you if you want to disseminate it to the participants. They can request it via you.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Or we can. I don't want to send it to people unsolicited, but yeah, I'd be happy to do that, because I think you know, we're pretty much nailed it in most areas on the technical side. I think the behavioural side is where the real change is going to come. When we can shift people's behaviour, then that's when we'll start making a big difference.
Brilliant. No, that would be great, Will. And yeah, I should say we will share the slides with you all, and also the chat, if there's anything in the chat that was noted that you'd like to pick up on. And yeah, as Will said, he's also happy to share some summing up of what he's been thinking about. So fantastic. Thank you, Will.
That's no problem.
All right. Well, yeah, a final thanks to our speakers, and I will bid you all a good evening.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.